זה המזגן הכללי שעובד.
אוקיי, בסדר.
את רוצה, מה, יש לך רעש עדיין?
אני שומע, לא, זה בסדר, זה בסדר. זה בסדר. אז בואו נתחיל. Today is the 13th of January 2015, and we are on day 2 with Hugo Marom at your house in Tzahala, Rehov Tzahal 66, Tel Aviv. And yesterday we left off with you telling me about not the major family, the family that you stayed with, not major.
You're talking about Bedford?
Yes, in Bedford.
The Chancellors?
The Chancellor's family. And we talked about the fact that you were there for about a week or two, and the conditions were a little bit hard because they also had 3 children and 3 mouths to feed, and that you and your brother ate a little bit more than you were probably rationed for. You told us the beautiful story of how you reconnected, or you spoke to the older sister.
Yeah.
And I want to know, where do you and your brother go from here?
Oh, my brother stayed there for quite a long time. My brother stayed there.
So this is actually the first time that you guys were separated.
It was the first time we were separated, but I stayed in the same town. I can't tell you exactly to which family I went from there. I landed up in after 1 or 2 families, maybe, I can't remember exactly, but I landed up, one I do remember, for those children that were sort of in a holding pattern, that the authorities, the English authorities didn't find families for them in the same town. We were put into a hostel at number 1 Cardington Road, which was run by a Mr. and Mrs. I've forgotten the name for the moment, an English teacher, both he and White, Mr. and Mrs. White.
Okay.
Mr. and Mrs. White ran this hostel, may have had something like 20 or 30 children there, English children. I was the only non.
This was an orphanage in Bedford?
No, not an orphanage. It was set up especially for evacuated kids that didn't have, that either the families decided they didn't want them for whatever reason, or the children decided that they didn't want to stay with a particular family. They were then billeted. We're talking about billets, B-I-L-L-E-T, billets. That's what they were called. We were billeted with the Chancellor family. I was billeted. Then most probably I went to another family, I can't remember. And then finally I landed up at one time in this particular home, which was temporarily set up for evacuated kids who didn't have specific billets. And I remember it very well because Mr. White was a teacher in a school in London. Actually, I met up with him much later, and he was quite a brutal type of a person.
Mr. White.
Yes, and I remember that he used to cane the kids whenever they scrumped apples or whatever. They didn't come back from school straight away or something like that. And his wife was always very protective of the kids as opposed to him. And from there I was billeted at number 131 Cardington Road. The home was at number 1, and then I was billeted with a Mrs. Graham, and she was a widow. Graham, Graham. She was a widow, and she had a son and a daughter who were much older. She must have been in her 60s at the time. And the road led to the famous Cardington Royal Air Force Base, which was the home of the R-100, which was the British Zeppelin. תודה.
Wait a second, I just want to try one thing. Just remember, Hugo, at the end of the day, this is only to make you look better.
So you can see the fact that I'm unshaven.
I wouldn't get into that much detail. Okay.
Okay.
Nice. So, is this so this is near a very famous Air Force base?
No, this happens to be a very famous Royal Air Force Base, which is in Cardington, which is an outskirts of Bedford, in which the R-100, I think it's the only place in England where they had an airship hangar, a giant hangar, in which historically the R-100 was built, maybe the R-101 was built, which are the British equivalent World War I, and thereafter the equivalent of the Zeppelin. By the way, just for a point of interest, the Zeppelin, the German Zeppelin, I only discovered last year, was based on a patent which was taken out in Germany by a Jewish aeronautical engineer by the name of Schwartz, and he designed exactly the same thing in his patent, in which he wrapped the cloth which surrounded the hydrogen, which was the gas they used at the time. That was the reason why it burned so well, with an aluminum cover. So his had Zeppelin built it exactly according to the patent, maybe it would have never been destroyed, would have never burnt. So Zeppelin claimed, of course, the glory of the design.
Yep.
Okay, but it actually belonged to this German Jewish inventor by the name of Schwartz. It actually is recorded in a new museum built near Rishon LeZion by a newspaperman by the name of Danny Shalom, who, in the memory of his daughter who passed away, built this aviation museum, and it's built mainly apart from aircraft. It's a civil museum. It holds a lot of records and so forth, and has this documentation. Anyhow, to get back to World War II and Bedford and Cardington, this particular hangar at the RAF base was used to build anti-aircraft balloons. I don't know whether you know, but one of the main defenses of the cities in England were balloons which were tethered on cables, and aircraft would fly into the cables, not into the balloons, because they were obvious. So it was a protective measure over critical factories and so forth and so on over the cities. So to what extent it helped, I don't know, and how many aircraft were brought down with cables, I don't know either. But I lived on the main road going there at this Graham for quite some time.
And you and your brother are separated.
Was separated in the sense that he lived across town.
Yeah. But still, I mean, that's...
We met. Sure, it was a separation. There were no telephones in those days.
Exactly.
So, but we met. We kept in touch. We were in different schools by then. Yes. By that time, I attended the Silver Jubilee School, which was a school at the time, doesn't exist anymore, although it was a very modern school. And there I met a very famous Austrian Jewish architect and painter by the name of Fritz Gross, who was an art master. He was brought to England, not as we children were brought without parents. His whole family was brought out. Udi, hold on. Yes, I'm in the middle of this because he affected the continuation of my life directly and indirectly very much. Fritz Gross was an Austrian architect who actually got his visas with his whole family because he was the founder of the so-called G-plan in architecture, which meant using space divided by furniture as opposed to walls. And he was very famous. Later he became the chief architect of Rolls-Royce, and he planned the whole city after the bombing and the war, replanned Bedford itself. Anyhow, he was the art master at the Silver Jubilee School. And
his name, Fritz?
Fritz Gross, Fritz. Z, Gross, Gross. And when he came into the class, I remember as if yesterday, he started from the back asking everybody what his name was. And we must have been like 30 students, and I was sitting in the front row, finally got to me. And he said, when he got to me and I said, what's your name? So I said, Hugo Marom. So he said, you're not English, are you? So I said, no, I'm Czech. And I said to him in return, and you're not English either. So he said, that's right. I'm Austrian from Vienna. And so I think I said to him, you are a refugee like I am, or something like that.
Wow,
you know?
How old are you?
I was 11. Wow. 11 and a half, something like that, 12 maybe. Anyhow, Fritz Gross, with his family, lived just outside of Bedford in Kempston Hoo, I think, and he invited me on a Sunday for lunch.
To his house?
To his house, and I met his family, and of course the only way to get to his house was either by bus or on a bicycle, and I didn't have a bicycle, so it was a bus ride. And in order to, his wife was extremely nice, Francie was her name, and they had a daughter by the name of Renee, who's still alive. She's also a painter and a psychologist and so forth. And anyhow, to cut a long story short, she used to invite me and sometimes my brother as well for Sunday lunch. Yes.
Fritz's wife?
Both, the family, out to Kempston. And she wanted to give me money, and I would never accept any money. So she said, will you accept money if I ask you to repair something? So I found out much later that she used to break a handle on a pot, on an aluminum pot, and I would rivet it back the handle on, and then she gave me a shilling or two or something, which covered my bus fare, plus gave me spare money, which in a way at that time was considerable, because we were getting from the British Jewish organization in London, which was connected to that hostel, that German hostel where we were, 6 pence a week. Now, a stamp to write home to Czechoslovakia cost 2.5 pence. So if we were to write every day, we didn't have enough money to write more than 2 letters a week. Okay? So anyhow, that's another story. I very soon, by the age of 12, I think, I started working on paper rounds. You know what a paper round is? Sure. Delivered newspapers. I used to,
But where are you living now? Who are you staying with?
I am staying with Mrs. Graham at number 131 Cardington Road.
And she's a widow.
She's a widow. Yeah. She has a son who works for Wall's Ice Cream. He pushes one of these carts, stop me and buy one. And his daughter and her daughter was sewing balloons at the RAF as a civilian employee of the Air Force.
And you're living with this lady in her house. Your brother is still with the other family.
Yes.
It's 1940 right now, something like this.
Yes, that's right.
What is your level of communications with your parents, and what are you hearing about what's going on back home? This is very interesting to me.
Well, all these letters are here, right behind me here. But I would say 1940, we are corresponding in a number of ways. One is through the International Red Cross. Okay. How these letters are sent, I can't remember exactly, but I have all the letters that I wrote and my brother wrote, because they were kept by this Czech family. Whatever my parents had before they went to the concentration camp, that was kept by them. So I have these letters, and I also have letters which I kept from my parents. So I have most of the letters until 1941, I think, early 41, something like that. The letters were either sent through the Red Cross or through friends. For instance, my father served in the Czech legions, and one of the officers, was in Sweden. I think I remember his name. His name was Shiroki. He was a colonel or something like that. And they wrote letters to this Mr. Shiroki, or whatever his name was, and he would send them to England through this neutral country, which was Sweden at that time, all right? So that was one way. The other way was through Budapest. There was a friend who also apparently was some kind of a friend from the army, my father's friend in Budapest. So there's some letters through Hungary. There are some letters from Yugoslavia, from either Zagreb or I think one of the cities, anyhow. Those three I remember very clearly, apart from the International Red Cross letters, which came once in 2 or 3 months or something like that. Letters were very detailed. My father was working in a quarry.
What's that?
In a stone quarry, just outside of town. He would come home to sleep, but they would work very long hours. It was hard labor, okay? And that's what they did with people who were either businessmen or qualified engineers and so forth, Jews. That's what they were doing in 1940. And I know that because I have his documents where it describes that he's working in this particular quarry, because all the documents were saved. They were in the apartment when they were taken to concentration camp. I think he worked there in that quarry until he was taken to concentration camp. My mother was employed, I believe, from the letters and from the documentation, as a cook in the Jewish community for poor people, where old people. Židovské obci, yes, exactly, which was in the same street where I was born, in Legionarska at that time. It still is today. And the letters really are continually asking, what are we doing? Why aren't we writing enough? And going into that kind of details. The last letters, more or less, are about the time I'm 13. So must have been like 41. where my father talks to me about my bar mitzvah and what it means and so forth, and basically telling me all those things which he would have told me had I been at home. We by that time had the German Jewish boys from the German Kindertransport, and 2 or 3 English Jewish boys from London who were evacuated, formed the first world, as far as we know, whether it's in Guinness or not, youth synagogue in Bedford. Maybe later on other evacuated Jewish children formed in various other places synagogues without grown-ups, where we prayed on Shabbat. In this particular case in Bedford, we I wouldn't say rented. I was a Boy Scout, and I was in a Boy Scout group, and I suggested that we use the Scout House as a synagogue on Saturdays. And the Scout Master, whom I vaguely remember, agreed to this, and we used the Scout House on Saturdays as a shul for our services. So I was actually bar mitzvahed in that youth synagogue, just like others of the kids who reached the age of 13.
Tell me about these letters about your bar mitzvah with your father. Were they emotional letters? Were they for you at
All
the
the
time?
letters are so emotional that I find it very difficult to go through them. Okay, my mother writes to me sometimes in Czech and sometimes in German. The reason being that she wants us to remember German, because she was of the impression that every language that you know is another culture.
Yeah, exactly.
I have letters. My grandmother, who lives with my parents, the one from Vienna, my only grandmother, mother's side, she also adds to the letters, and very often Tonda, my mother's friend, or my parents' friend, who skied with us and played tennis and so forth, he also adds a few words. So there's always some
depth.
yes. Oh yes, yes. Their details, I would say, every letter is like at least 2 pages. Okay, very thin airmail letters, so that they would go into an airmail envelope. We were at one time writing letters. I don't think somehow they either didn't get or were not allowed or whatever it was. There was a period during the war where they had air letters. You bought for a certain amount of money a form which was already prepared. It was printed, the stamp was printed on it, and it was called an air letter, if I'm not mistaken.
Now, these letters that I want to talk specifically about the bar mitzvah letters because we're going to get to it soon. You're about to be bar mitzvahed. You know, this must be a very, you're alone.
Yes.
Family's not with you, at least your parents. Is there an extra meaning for this bar mitzvah, as far as you're concerned, at the time? Is it like, because I'm sure you understand better than your younger brother what's going on with the Jews, at least back in Czechoslovakia.
I don't know exactly how to answer. I know what you're driving at. The point is, we're very much aware of the fact that we're Jewish. I think it's become clear in Bedford, which was not clear in London, that all of us, whether we're from Germany or Czech, and we were only 5 Czechs, and the rest was all German kids. So, and there were few English. So there is in the background a feeling that the English Jewish kids and we are on one side, and the German Jewish kids are on the other side, in the background. But Bedford, in addition to the synagogue, which was very much supported. What the organization that was responsible for the hostel in London sent a Mr. and Mrs. Harris, who had a son and a daughter. The son was Ansel Harris, who eventually moved to Israel and worked in the Ministry of Finance or something like this. And Joan Harris, which was the daughter, she was the older one. They lived at number 2 Sydney Road in Bedford.
In Bedford, okay.
And they turned their home was big. It was a 2-story.
How many kids are all together? The 5 Czechs, the British, and the German. How many are the German? 20, 30, 40 kids?
Maybe roughly 25.
25. So altogether, you're about 40 kids.
No, 25, I would say, at the moment. I think so, not more.
And you're all together in Bedford.
And everybody's living somewhere else. And once a week, or in the evenings when somebody wanted to play ping pong, the garage was turned. He didn't have a car, so they turned the garage in the back of the house with a ping pong table, and everybody participated in playing ping pong. In fact, Rudy, my brother, was exceptional, so was Willy Tomashov. They were very good at ping pong. So this was a sort of a pastime. In addition to that, Arnold Harris, who was the father on the charge of the home, it was a sort of a, I would say, cultural, trying to keep us as in school, we all had to pray together with the English children. We had to learn to sing the English hymns with, Church of England. Most of the schools were Church of England. So this was sort of keeping us within the Jewish.
So you guys would go to normal schools during the day?
Yes, get up every day and pray together with the English children. We learned all the hymns that all the schools sang.
This light is making shadows on you.
No, you can't turn it off there. It's on the floor here. Okay.
Move your hand. Let me see if you... move your hand like this. No shadows. So basically what the Harris family provides for you guys is kind of like a club.
Exactly, that's the best way to describe it. It's a club where the kids are sometimes in the evenings, and especially during Jewish holidays, we would meet there and sometimes have Friday night dinner. She would prepare food, sandwiches and whatever, and they would organize here and there. I remember rambles to go to Cambridge, and so forth, to visit various places. It was very close to the railway line, and I remember some of the kids were had the hobby of noting down railway engine numbers and so forth. Anyhow, in addition to the ping pong and so forth, they were, Arnold Harris, I think, was a teacher himself. I think maybe in a Jewish school in London. Anyhow, he made sure that we learned, we studied sometimes and participated in reading Perek Avot, Pirkei Avot, and so forth, especially after the synagogue, which they supported very much and helped to...
Tell me a little bit about this synagogue.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about it. You started to talk about it. I want to get a little bit of...
There were among us, a few of the kids were much older, much older. I think they were 16, 17. They were about to join the army, and they were in, I remember 2 of the German boys were in a very good school. There was the Bedford public school, which somehow 1 or 2 of the German children who were older somehow got into the school. Whether they got a scholarship or not, these were very expensive schools, and I'm sure that the Jewish community didn't pay, that they must have somehow been received because either of their good education prior to their coming to England. One of them was Hausmann, I remember, and so forth. And some of them were in the modern school, which was also a semi-private school. And but I was in a very simple elementary school, which was called the Silver Jubilee School, which was far away from the center.
But what about this
Sydney Road?
Where physically do you guys have it? Where is it physically?
On the way to number 2 Sydney Road, we went through a part of town on the way to the railway station. I don't remember the exact address. There was a scout behind a normal building. In the yard of this normal building, there was a scout yard. And
like the normal scouts?
Like normal scout, yes. Yeah, yeah. The whole week, the whole time was a normal scout. And I had some connect. I was a Boy Scout by then, pretty well with all these, practically a King Scout, which is the highest rank you can get. Must have been nearly 13. So I was exceptional in this thing that by that age, normally you got to be a King Scout, I think at the age of 15 or 16. But I'd passed all these tests and exams, rope and tying and climbing and whatever. And the older boys wanted to arrange, some of them came from very Orthodox families from Germany, and more Orthodox than we. And I would say that Arnold Harris and they came from an Orthodox London family. So somehow, I don't remember. I remember this scoutmaster's name. His name was Cox, C-O-X. And Mr. Cox, who was my scoutmaster, asked about me getting the other kids to join the Boy Scouts. And somehow it got round to the fact that we had no place. Most of the Sabbath praying was done at number 2 Sydney Road prior to that. But when Mr. Cox allowed us to put up this synagogue, to use his hut for synagogue, we established the Bedford Youth Synagogue in that scout house, which was used on the high holidays, on Shabbat and so forth.
And it was just you guys?
Just us, plus 2 or 3 English. There was the Fisher family, and the parents of these English kids used to come to the synagogue, and I remember specifically the only Jewish family in Bedford was a World War I fighter pilot by the name of Rose, and they had a big store, a fashion shop in the arcade in Bedford, and he used to invite the kids for lunch. And I spent 1 or 2 Saturday lunches with him and his daughter, who had a beautiful daughter. She was a student at the university or something like that. And he and his wife and the daughter used to come to the synagogue. So some of the English Jews over the weekend didn't stay in London during the bombing, but they came over the weekend and stayed in hotels. Some of them even bought a small apartment or something. So at the weekend, the grown-ups, would not be in London during the Blitz, and they came to Bedford, which was like 50 miles, like a 1-hour train ride, or drove their cars, as one of them I remember. And they participated. There was no other synagogue in Bedford. So they grown-ups participated in...
No Jews in Bedford?
No, except this family Rose.
One family.
As far as I know, one family.
Wow. I want to ask you about your bar mitzvah.
Yes.
About the actual bar mitzvah.
Yes.
Who taught you how to read Torah?
Oh, we, first of all, at home. I learned already from my father. Every Friday we used to sit prior to Friday night, and I could read fluently. So I didn't know what I was reading.
You didn't know what you were reading, but you could read.
Yes, like that's how we were brought up. I think most of the kids were in that situation, and but the Torah was something else, because you were reading from the Torah without not the way it's printed in the. I still have here a prayer book which I got on my bar mitzvah, I think.
Yeah.
And
Was your bar mitzvah a very, do you remember your bar mitzvah?
not very much, not very much. I think I do remember that I read the Haftorah, if you know what that is.
Sure.
Okay. And I think that was it. I can't tell you very much about it.
Okay.
I don't even know whether my bar mitzvah was the only bar mitzvah
It's okay.
in October. I don't
That's
know.
okay.
But I do have the Siddur, which is both Hebrew and English, still here in the library.
And like you said before, until 1941, you have contact with your parents. Is that correct?
I would
Until
say yes.
1941.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the world around you
Yes.
and what you remember. Do you remember? Well, there's the Blitzkrieg, and then there's the Battle.
Not Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is something completely different. Blitzkrieg is the German word for a tank battle.
Sure.
Or tank-led invasion.
Well, what I'm
We're
getting
talking
to,
about the Blitz, which is
no, I'm
the...
talking about the Blitzkrieg in Europe.
Okay.
Through Holland,
Yes,
France,
okay.
Belgium.
Yes.
Then
We are...
Then Dunkirk
Yes,
happens.
yes, very good. Okay,
And
sorry.
I wanted to know if you remember that event of Dunkirk.
Not only do I remember, but you must take into consideration the fact that I think every home kept a map of Europe, later on of Russia, and they had pins with flags, and they would show the advance practically in every home. No television, only from the radio. We would listen in the newspapers, and they would put flags of British Army, German Army, and so forth, advancing, especially later on in the stages. I remember all the tank battles at Smolensk and the various cities in Russia as the Germans were advancing. Everybody was involved, especially the youngsters were involved in keeping up with the advance of the Germans, Stalingrad, and the changeover later on in 42.
What's one of the most significant memories you have of not the end of the war, not the beginning of the war, because we talked about the beginning of the war, Dunkirk, the Blitz, the Battle for London, something that's really rooted in your mind?
I think that there are a number of things, like like the failed attack at Narvik, the British forces in Norway, Dunkirk, of course, a very detailed description of the boats picking up the soldiers of the Czech forces in Dunkirk which participated, the debacle, the shooting of refugees as they were advancing, the German the German dive bombers diving and shooting at helpless refugees. And there would be the Movietone news, which we were shown every
cinemas.
week,
Cinemas,
every
no?
time you went to the cinema,
Yeah.
whether you paid to go in or whether you got in without paying. We went to see there was no cinema show without the Movietone news showing what was happening during the entire war.
That was very common to have like the newsreels before the films or before.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes. I think there was practically no advertising at that time, and that was sometimes the more interesting. The Movietone news sometimes were more interesting than the films themselves. And in England at that time, there was no such a thing as a ticket to a certain place in the cinema. And there was no such a thing as a show starting at a certain time. You went to a cinema, you got into the middle of a picture, and you stayed till the next middle of the picture or the second picture, till you got to the same point where you came in and you went out. Or you stayed for another, if you had enough time or whatever it was, okay?
It's So these are memories that you have: Dunkirk, Norway, the battle for Britain.
Battle of Britain, of course. I saw bombers flying over and bombing a railway station. I was in a later on, of course. I finally reached the age where I had to leave school because nobody was there to pay for further education. So at the age of 13,
yeah,
I left school, and 14, between 13 and 14, I left Silver Jubilee School and had to go to work. So I had made friends when I was living at number 1 Cardington Road.
And this is all because there's nobody to pay your tuition.
That's right. So the only way to continue schooling was to get a scholarship. And to prepare yourself for a scholarship, you had to do it on your own, in other words. So I decided to get a job, and I went for apprenticeship in this profession, which you see there on the table there. See that piece of iron there? Yeah. I went to, opposite number 1 Cardington Road was a cobbler who was quite old. He must have been in his 50s, 60s. To me, he was very old. And I befriended him whilst I was at number 1 Cardington Road. And when I finished school at the Silver Jubilee School, he offered me an apprenticeship, and that I would be able to live there with him. And in the attic, he would provide a light for me, and I could study and prepare myself for the scholarship. So I lived there with him. It was after Mr. and Mrs. Graham. And I worked 16 hours a day.
What was your job exactly?
Learning how to repair shoes. First with nails, then with wooden pegs, up to the point, I got to the point of where I was about to start learning how to sew. Yes, that's right. And he was the first one who bought me. He went to the police and bought, the police had bicycles which were either stolen and found and what I left behind, and for $1.50 shillings in a sale at the police station, he bought me a ruined bicycle.
Yeah.
He painted it black, shining black, and bought a bell for it and a lamp and gave it to me as a present on my birthday. I think on my 14th birthday or something like that. I was doing pretty well repairing shoes, and at night he had a lamp up in the attic, and he slept on the left-hand side of the lower part of the attic, and I on the right-hand side, and he brought a cable, and I had this light, and I would study from, let's say, 6 o'clock in the evening till midnight, prepare myself for the scholarship, which I passed for the Northwestern Polytechnic, which was in Luton, which was like another 25 miles back towards London. And I won this scholarship, which included my train fare and enough money they paid for the school, my train fare, and I don't know, some pocket money was left over.
And this is a scholarship for high school?
Yes, this is today it's a college of the London University, but at that time was called the Northwestern Polytechnic, and it was evacuated from London to Luton. And every day I would ride the train from Bedford. The first thing I would do was go to the train station, pick up the newspapers, bring them to the newspaper shop, mark the addresses on them, take the bicycle which he had given me, and I would do this paper round and finish, let's say, by 7 or something like that. And then I would pick up my stuff and take the bike to the railway station, get on the train, which would leave in time. It was a half an hour ride, I think, maybe 25 minutes, to Luton. And one day I'm sitting in the railway station in Bedford, and all of a sudden we see a Heinkel bomber, and I was very good at aircraft recognition by that time. I don't know whether I told you, but one of my letters to my parents, I wrote to them that I've decided not to be in one of the professions that they wanted me to be in, but that I was going to be an aeronautical engineer and a pilot if I could possibly do so.
What did your
I was
parents want you to
11
be?
years old. I don't know.
Doctor, lawyer.
Most probably
Engineer.
medicine. Yeah, most probably medicine. And if not medicine, certainly not what I wanted to be when I was a kid, was a fireman. Okay? On a big red thing with high ladders, automatic ladders going up and so forth, because these toys were toys we had from our uncle's shop.
Aha, okay. So, and where's your brother at this time? Is he still at the Chancellor's house?
No, I don't think so. I don't know.
Okay.
He's one of in
But
the
you're-
same area.
But you see him.
Oh yes, we're in contact at least once a week. We meet. I give him money because I'm working, he's not working, and he's only getting 6 months a week, which isn't enough. So I buy his clothing and so forth. Remember, we're wearing clothing where the pullovers go up to here, and in this section you have no clothing. Socks have to be cut open to put them on. Shoes sometimes have to be cut open. You have no idea what. It was a very difficult time. But as kids, you know, you took it.
Easier.
I played soccer with boots which were football shoes, which I got from somebody, which were too small. And both my brother and I played soccer practically professionally.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyhow, through Fritz Gross, the art master, I got to know his brother-in-law. France's sister lived in London, and she was married to a fellow called Leo Adlersberg. And Leo Adlersberg was in the leather business in London, and we were in Bedford, so it was always a sort of a dream to go and see what was going on in London. The Blitz was in London. Bedford was, on that particular day when I saw the Heinkel over the railway station, we saw the bombs fall out. They fell in the direction of the railway station. They hit the theater, which was right opposite the railway station, the only big theater.
This was in broad daylight?
In broad daylight, 8 o'clock in the morning, the train, or 7:30, the train was about to leave.
What kind of German plane?
Heinkel 111. And we saw the bombs come out. We saw the bomb doors open. It was very low, and relatively low, most probably 3,000 feet or something like that. The doors opened, the bombs fell out, 4 or 5 of them, and they came in our direction, the big explosion, and the whole train, with us sitting in it, and I was on the right-hand side, leaned over. The train, all the carriages leaned over. They hit the side of the platform. Remember, there's a high platform, about the height of a yard at least, and the carriages fell back onto the railway line. And of course, we thought that the railway station had been bombed. So we went out, and we saw this whole. There was nothing left of this theater. There was nobody in the theater, nobody was hurt, but the whole theater, which was wood and bricks, had collapsed. It was the building which they had hit. And I think they were aiming at the railway station, not at the theater.
Not at the theater, of
The
course.
difference was 100 yards maybe. Anyhow, that was my memory of the closest bombing attack,
Now-
second closest.
And you're at this time starting to go to
I
school.
go to Luton.
So you're really, as we say in English, getting yourself together. Both you're studying, you're doing good.
Yes.
What do you want to do? You want to be
I want to be an aeronautical engineer.
Because of all the
From the age of
airplanes?
11, that's what I wrote, and everything was around aviation in my
Where
head.
were you first exposed to aviation?
First time to aviation was a few days before we left Brno. My parents agreed to take us to the cemetery to see my brother's grave and my grandpa's grave and grandma's grave, which we'd never been to the cemetery. I'm nearly 11, Rudy was with us, and we went to the cemetery, and the cemetery in Brno, in Židanice, was right outside the end or the beginning, the start of the main Air Force runway. Now we're in July 1939, and there standing, running up with full power, is a Messerschmitt. And the blast from the running up is towards the entrance of the cemetery. And as we come out with my parents, we practically can't stand up because we're talking about 200 yards maybe. We feel this thing. And this impressed me so, seeing the fighter, which, you know, not in films or anything like that, only maybe in stories and so forth. And all of a sudden you see this fighter aircraft standing there about to take off. I don't think we stayed there to see it take off, but this was my first and most so-and-so.
Wow.
My second experience to aviation was soon after we arrived in Bedford. I saw a P-51 Mustang shoot down a German airplane above Bedford.
Wait, sir. Second time?
Second time was, we were walking down, we were in town, I can't tell you when and how, but it was, there was an air raid warning, and we saw a German airplane. I think it may have been a Dornier or something like this, and I saw a P-51 come and attack it, and there was a lot of noise of firing of guns, whether it was from the Dornier or so-and-so, but the airplane that crashed and went down in flames was the P-51 and not the German bomber. So this was my second so-and-so. The third time was much later, was in the Czech State Secondary School, which I got to much later.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. So you are, I'm figuring that, how do things go for you at the school in Luton?
I was top of the class in the English school, although I was the least English speaking at the beginning. I'm speaking about the Silver Jubilee class. You know, in England, you get classed, you get points, you get percentages out of every subject, and then in the end, and in every subject, you're positioned in the class. Let's say you got 60 out of math, and there was somebody who got 62, and there's nobody higher than that, so the 62 would be the number one in maths in class, and the 60 would be number two, and so forth. That's how and then in the end, they made an average, and somebody from all his marks together was top of the class. So I reached the top of the class. I still have some of the notebooks which I wrote at that time, which I kept all over the place. And I got to the the Northwestern Polytechnic, and I wasn't there too long. I joined the Army Cadet Corps.
Okay. What year do you join the Army Cadet Corps? 16?
Well, first of all, how did I get to... I told you that I got this scholarship. Right. I traveled every day to Luton, except Saturdays and Sundays. And I played soccer for the Northwestern Polytechnic. And the Northwestern Polytechnic was billeted in the Luton Modern School. In other words, they didn't build a new school. They were evacuated from London and joined an existing high school, okay, which was the Luton Modern School, if I'm not mistaken. And so from the railway station, I would take a bus, which was also paid for by the scholarship, to the school which was on the outskirts of Luton. And the playing grounds and the school were available to the Northwestern Polytechnic.
Okay.
Whilst I was in the Northwestern, and at that particular time, from the time of my bar mitzvah, I became very friendly, or they became very friendly with us, both my brother and I. Fritz Grotz's brother-in-law and Franz's sister, who were in London, and they somehow, they had one grown-up daughter, and they wanted to take care of us, sort of take sort of an umbrella, which Fritz Gross was doing in a way, but they wanted much more than that. They wanted to take care of us and so forth. And we didn't want to be adopted. They were talking about that kind of protection. Maybe they were both Polish. Lou Langford was from Poland, from Lvov, and his wife was Viennese, like Franzi, like Gross's parents. And they wanted to take, and one day, while I was still at the Northwestern Polytechnic, and Rudy was approaching the age of 13, he took us to London, took me to London, to the Czech, not embassy, but to the Czech government in exile, which had a ministry of education. And he took me straight to the director of the office of the Ministry of Education, to a fellow called Polak. I remember his name because Polak eventually married a distant cousin of my wife Martha. Small world. So we come into his office and he says, I've got 2 Czech boys in Bedford, and I want you to have them, they want to go back to Czechoslovakia, their parents are back there. I want you to, for them to continue education in the Czech State Secondary School. Mr. Polak, in my presence, answered him, there's no way, because the Czech State Secondary School is only for government and exile children. Their parents were in the whole government was in London. Yeah. It was the only government that went to London. Plus any children of any servicemen serving in the British Army, Air Force, and so forth. And they have their parents, and so there's nobody in England. No, so there's no way. So Leo Langford was a tall guy. He must have been like 6 foot.
Who's Leo?
Leo Adlersberg is the brother-in-law of Fritz Gross,
okay. Yeah,
the art master.
Okay, who took you? Yes, okay, I'm sorry. So what did he say?
And he was very adamant. He said, if you don't take these boys, I'll make your life impossible. Basically, in English, everything. And this guy was speaking in a poor English. He was Czech, maybe spoke Hungarian as well, or Slovak. I can't remember. It was Polak. He certainly wasn't from Bohemia. He was from Karpathy Ruthenia, where my wife comes from. And anyhow, within 2 weeks, we were on our way to the Czech State Secondary School. This must have been summer, at the end of the summer, so-and-so, and we started in 1943. 43 were by this time. In the meantime, I was with a Turtle family in Bedford, who were British Israelites. It's a very interesting...
I don't understand something.
Yeah.
You're going to the school in Luton.
Yeah.
Now you're going to the Czech school?
Yeah. I finished the term. The term finished.
So
and I'm on...
This whole thing that you studied for the scholarship and over, done.
Finished. Well, I finished either 2 forms or something like that. Maybe a year went by. And in the meantime, we got to the end of the year in 1943. In other words, in June or something like that. We're on holiday on a spending a month, my brother and I, with the Adlersberg family in London. They put us up in their apartment or found us a room somewhere with some friends, now that I remember. And he takes me to the Czech so-and-so.
Hold on a sec. I'm just switching batteries. Because this...
Yeah.
Let's close the aperture. So...
You ever heard of Soček?
Soček, yes.
Yes. His grandfather was Drtina, and he was also sentenced to death by the communists. Or something like this. I don't know whether he died prior to being sentenced, but he was the Minister of Justice, Dr. Drtina, and his niece was a girlfriend of mine, and she married Soček, and she was a sort of a pink social democrat, half communist, Silva Drtinova. Her name was not Fleischmanova, but this picture here is all the kids that were at the Czech State Secondary School, or most of them at the reunion. Where is Silva? Czech ambassador. The man who made the film this is the reunion. I don't know whether it's the first one. It's in '98. That must be the second reunion, June 19th. Albert Abinant reunion.
Now I see.
Yeah.
Now I see.
Where were we?
Wait a sec. Okay. Actually... Hold on. This is good. This is giving me a reflection from this light. See that light over there? It's hitting this. So I'm just gonna put it down for a second. And put it back up. It's giving me a very hard. So. Much better. Okay. So you, after 2 weeks, go to the Czech.
We start the school year of 1943 in most probably August, the 1st of August or something like that, maybe a little before that. This is a picture. This is downstairs. No, in my previous office.
So to go to the Czech school,
Yeah.
you have to leave Bedford, no?
Yeah, you leave everything, pick up your
Where do you live
one
now?
suitcase at the Czech State Secondary School. Is a boarding school.
Okay, I didn't
It's
know
the first co-educational boarding school in England. In Great Britain, they never had one and they will never have one. In other words, in the same building, downstairs were classrooms. The first floor was boys and the second floor was girls.
Wow.
Bedrooms.
So
And
this-
in the third floor were teachers. Remember, we're in central Wales, in a place called Llanwrtyd Wells, which is spelled Llanwrtyd, and we're in the county of Brecon, far away from the war.
Where is the school located exactly? In Brecon?
In Brecon, in the county of Brecon, in Wales, which is right in the middle of Wales, in the mountainous area.
So this is a huge change for you.
Oh yes, this is. There's a little village called Llanwrtyd Wells, which is a result of the school's contribution, became a town eventually, with the help of one of the students, rich Czech students by the name of Maraom. He enabled the town. He bought the town the golden chain for the mayor. So, which was the only thing which prevented from this village becoming a town. They didn't have enough money to buy a golden chain for the mayor.
So you are all of a sudden in a school with privileged kids,
with
sons of diplomats, sons of people who
served in the army and Air Force,
British Army, the
Czech army and Czech,
the Czech army that ran away to London. With the Czech politicians, the Benish government.
Yes.
So you're like really with.
We the two of us.
Yeah, you and your brother
are the only ones that are an exception to the background of all the other kids.
And how does that play out?
I don't think it made any difference to them. It made a difference to us because during the holidays, they went to their families. We had no family to go to except to the Langford, to the Adlersbergs, okay? So they sort of became our foster parents, okay? And apart from the fact that 43, 44, 45, so we're there 2.5 years, and during the first summer holiday, I worked on the farm as a sheep.
As a shepherd?
More than a shepherd, we took care of the sheep, taking them through the dip. You know what a dip is? Yes, you know what a shepherd. Okay, then you know. So, and I rode horseback together with the dogs to get the sheep together to go through the dip, and that was part of the work. Some of the work I did with milk rounds. I learned to drive an electric milk van.
So you guys are really...
We studied...
and everything's in Czech? You're back to speaking Czech in the school?
Yeah, everything's in Czech. Rudy is having a very difficult time because he lost a lot of his Czech. But it's coming back to him. It's coming back to him to the extent that when we got back to Czechoslovakia, he went to high school, to his normal class. And so we're speaking,
Do you remember, for example, I think it's I know this is something that I'm taking you back.
Yes.
Do you remember, because it came out of England and the Czech government in exile, but do you remember, I know you don't remember it because you weren't there, but do you remember hearing about the assassination of Heydrich?
Oh yeah, not only did we hear, remember this is a Czech state secondary school which
is... Are you in that school when this happens? Or you don't remember exactly?
I can't...
I think it was 42, Heydrich was assassinated. I'm not sure. 42 or 43. I don't remember exactly the date.
I should know exactly. I should know exactly. From the fact that I've been closely connected with the Czech Museum in Prague, and I know the story from Knížek, who is a very good friend of mine, who is the president of all the military museums. And one of the things that they have recently done is been to document the Heydrich affair, the Heydrich assassination. I think that I can't tell you.
Okay.
If you told me the date, if it was 1943, which I don't think it was.
I think it was 42.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
And It was, wait a minute. Heydrich was at the Wannsee conference
41.
in Berlin.
41.
That's right. And but by that time he was already the governor
Of Bohemia.
of Bohemian Moravia,
Yeah, the protectorate.
of the protectorate. But anyhow, it was knowledge
Of course.
which came through the news
Of course,
and so
of course,
forth.
of course.
And of course we're very proud of the fact and so forth and so on.
That the paratroopers came from London. They
Yes,
were
yes.
sent.
I think it was.
Yeah.
The
let-
British government took credit for this.
Yeah,
There's no
so-
question
yeah,
about it.
So, you're in this school. Tell me a little bit about this school. Does this school, is it like pumping you guys with not to forget the homeland and ideals of democracy? And is there anything political there, or is it just school?
First of all, it's definitely a place which is to ensure that we maintain our Czech
Identity.
so and so. It's continuing exactly the same spirit as the schools we went to. In other words, there were, to give you an example, let's say there were 120 students, 60 girls and 60 boys, let's say for a moment. It's in that order of magnitude. So we had a rabbi there by the name of Stransky, who then became the chief rabbi of Haifa. We had a Catholic priest who was a friend of our Latin professor of Latin by the name of Styx, S-T-Y-X, which was the famous river in the Roman or the Roman histories and so forth, which one had to cross to go to hell or heaven,
Yeah.
to the other world. We had a Protestant priest, and the same thing happened as back at the school in Brno, when the religious classes were on. Everyone went separately to his. Definitely, there was a master who was Jewish. His name was Fried, F-R-I-E-D, and he was intent in convincing the kids to go back to Czechoslovakia. In other words, there was a drive to make sure that the kids didn't sort of stay in England or something like that, that they had a reason, and they found all the good reasons why we should go home to this country, which was better in many ways than we were experiencing in England. So to some of us, it was very easy to convince us. It was very easy
Were
to.
you glad to be back amongst Czechs?
Yes, definitely, because of everything. Because not only because of food, but because of behavior, because of sport. We had a national team, soccer team. We played tennis for Czechoslovakia. We played soccer against English schools as the Czech national team. My brother was an excellent soccer player, eventually became the president of the United States Women's, he established the Women's Soccer Association in the United States.
Wow, okay.
Before he joined after he came back from Korea. And so on. So it was, ping pong was at a very high standard. We established an air training corps unit together with Llaneltid, with the town of Llaneltid.
What does that mean?
That means the British had, like the Germans had the...
like a civil...
No, not civil. When anybody reached the age of 17 or 16 and 3 months, he had to register for military service. Now, he had the choice to wait till he got to the age of 18, and then he would be called up automatically, or he could voluntarily join an air training corps or an army corps. Army cadets, these were cadets. And they were trained. I was in the Army Cadet Corps in Luton already. okay, uniform and this, and we trained marching and shooting and all this, and the same thing happened. And I got together with a number of people who were interested in aviation, and we established together with the town of Glenatid Wells an air training corps, number so-and-so, I've forgotten the squadron number, okay? And we got an officer from the RAF who was in charge of the unit, and we trained in navigation, in signals, and so forth. There must be pictures around.
Okay, no, we'll get to the pictures after.
Okay,
yeah.
never mind, I haven't got time for it now.
So this is at what age, 16?
Yes, from the age of 16 and 3 months, and there was quite a number of us. The unit must have been something like 20 of us. And we would go to bases, to RAF bases, together with like all the other units in England. It was similar setup like the Hitlerjugend, you know, in Germany, preparing people to go into the services. And for me, it was ideal. I actually was promoted to become, we had a sergeant whose father was a Czech, was a captain in Air France, a Czech pilot in Air France, and he became later on a flight test engineer by the name of Sladek. He's still alive in south of France, works for a French helicopter company. And I was a corporal. I was promoted to become a corporal, not on the basis of height or width or so forth, but on I was so interested, and I taught navigation and signals and so forth, aircraft recognition, aerodynamics, and so forth.
So you are completely feeling that you are in the right direction.
Oh yes. The third, we started talking about what airplanes affected me. The third thing, we're sitting in class, and there's a big explosion. In class in Wales, in the Czech school. Yeah. We're sitting in class, and I remember the class when there's a big explosion. We all run out, and we see. Some of us saw, I'm not sure whether I saw or heard from people who saw, a Lancaster bomber diving towards the school and crashes within 500 yards of the school. And we run over to the place, and we find bodies, half dead, thrown all over the place. They must have, the airplane exploded in the air. A bomb in the airplane apparently exploded, and the airplane crashed near the school, and the whole crew of 10 had died during the time. They fell from, I don't know, 1,000 feet or so, from very low flying airplane. And it was coming back from a bombing raid, most probably had a hung up bomb in the bomb bay, which exploded. So this affected, I know that for months on after that, we made jewelry from the plastic, from the plexiglass, you know, from the so-and-so.
Do you remember seeing that?
What, the jewelry?
No,
I came to a person who was in a hole in the ground, who was not quite dead, and he mumbled, but he died within a few seconds after I got to him. I got to 2 or 3 of these people. Okay. Anyhow, part of the Air Training Corps, we went to an Air Force base, to a U.S. Air Force base, and we were supposed to fly with them on a training mission. And we arrived at this base, and we had breakfast at a U.S. canteen of that base. It was a very large base. And I shall never forget, we line up for breakfast, and there's a block of butter, this size, like a square, 2 feet square block of butter. We got these aluminum dishes, which had compartments for various different foods. And 2 things I remember. The American pilots took a sort of a wooden ladle and took a piece of butter on this thing, which was like 2 weeks' ration for English people. From there, they went to a plate, hot plate, with their fried eggs on it, and they would take like 3, 4, or 5 eggs and put them on their dish. And finally, at the end, was I shall never forget it. Must have been a pot, like 30 inches across, and it was filled with peaches, half peaches, pink peaches, which I hadn't eaten since Czechoslovakia. Okay,
America.
So, yeah, America. It was America. Yeah, that same evening, 30% of the aircraft didn't return. So our flight, which was planned for the next day, was put off.
What do you mean, your flight?
We were supposed to fly as cadets on a training flight in England with the B-17s.
But you're like 16 years old, no?
I'm, by that time, we're talking about 44. End of 44, I'm 18.
Yeah.
No, I'm 17. 16. I'm getting on to 17. It's end of the war, end of 44. I'm nearly 17, okay? And all the cadets from this unit, we were invited, part of the training was that we're going to participate in a training flight in England. But it was put off because 30% of this force was shot down. Was daylight raid in Germany. By the evening, they claimed that 30% of the aircraft didn't come back to base. That doesn't mean that they were all shot down, but they didn't come back. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, finally when the war was over, as a result of the Air Training Corps, and as a result of the kids being part of the government and forces, we were all flown, who wanted to go back, we were all flown in Liberators of the Czech squadron back to Prague. In the bomb bays. They put benches in the bomb bays with our suitcases, and let's say 10 guys, 10 kids were in this so-and-so. And of course I was a cadet, so I was allowed to bring my brother Rudy too. And we flew few days after the end of the war. We flew back to Prague, and that's how we got back, with the Czech Air Force. Okay?
And the Czech government in exile, or?
Yes, so the students in the school who wanted to go back went back. So a lot of us came back on those flights. When the Czech squadron flew back with their Liberators, they took us as passengers. The kids from the school. Only the kids from the school.
Do you remember, I want to ask you something. Do you remember at some point during the war that you start hearing rumors about concentration camps, about mass executions?
Of course, I remember when Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, before the end of the war.
I'm talking about before the end of the war.
The details of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, what they found there, and who found them, and so forth, were published in England. So that was the first time that anybody had heard of concentration camps. That was first, that was number one. Then, shortly after that, we're talking about February 45, March maybe.
I'm actually even talking a little bit before, 43, 44.
No, absolutely, no idea.
No idea.
No idea whatsoever. We knew that people went to labor camps, just as my father was working, so it's obvious that he was still working hard labor, that my mother was cooking publicly.
But
no idea. Nobody had any idea whatsoever.
But towards the end of the war, rumors started
We're
to come
talking
out
about 45. No rumors.
Okay.
Bergen-Belsen, I think the British Army entering Bergen-Belsen, if I'm not mistaken, was the British Army. The whole story breaks loose. That most probably there are other camps, and so forth. And the International Red Cross publishes lists of people who have come back, who are still alive. And in that list, I found my cousin René Meisel and nobody else.
But this is already back in Prague.
No, in England.
In England.
International Red Cross lists were put up in the school. I remember them being put up on the notice board, lists of the International Red Cross, and in that I find my cousin René Meisel, and no other Meisel. So the story gets around that there are other camps, they haven't been yet so-and-so, and that nothing to worry about, it said worry about. They were not at Bergen-Belsen, okay? You want to ask when? What the Czech government did immediately after the war, I don't know what other governments did, but on all public buildings, schools, courthouses, police stations, town halls, lists with all the names of the people, all the Jewish people, in alphabetical order, were put down. So you would find Erna Meisel, Pavel Meisel, Berta Meisel, and so forth. And next to it was a column which said, who saw this person last? Date, where, address of the person who saw this person.
There was also a lot of things on the radio and a lot of...
No, mainly on these lists.
On these lists.
There were on the radio people who were looking for so-and-so. Anybody, who had access to get to the radio station, very few. But mainly these lists. And these lists recorded the person who last saw that person.
Sure.
By 1947, end of 47, the courts took the last person who saw that person, unless there was a record of him being executed or whatever from the Germans. At that time, there were still very few German lists available. The courts pronounced a date of death, the date at which that particular person saw Erna Meisel. So Erna Meisel was seen to be a cook in a Russian prisoner of war camp by somebody who left the camp on such and such a date. They added 2 weeks to it and said, this is the date which shall be considered by all authorities to be the date of death of my mother. And my father, similar. Only a few months ago, right here, in this thing, Yad Vashem, somebody who is well connected with Yad Vashem, a friend of mine, whose name is today Har Shalom, who was in the Air Force with us, brings me pages which were registered in by my cousin in the United States, who registered my father and my mother and and our joint grandmother. And among this is all from Yad Vashem, where they were born and so forth. And then among these papers is a recently available, there's the documents where my mother, father, and my grandmother were taken to Terezin on the 27th of March, 1942. So my letters go to 41. There's no more letters. Then in 27th of March, 42, they're taken to Terezin. And on the 1st of April, 1942, which is 4 days later, they're taken to Auschwitz, to a place called Piaski, which is near to Auschwitz. Okay, it's a working camp associated with Auschwitz. This is an official record from Terezin. okay, a photo. And I found this out quite some time ago. Now, based on documentation, which was the pronunciation of death of my father, was sometime in towards the end, I think most probably, somebody saw Paul Meisel in this camp in, let's say, December 1942. But as a result of this page coming out of German records only recently, he is listed to have been gassed and burnt on, I must take my glasses. This is an original handwritten record of the person who recorded on the 4th of July 42. In other words, assuming that they arrived in Piaski on the 1st of April, so April, May, June, July. So only not 9 months later, but actually Paul Meisel, number 7831, born 3rd of April 1895 in Brünn, was cremated on the 4th of July 1942, together with a bunch of other people. There may have been a few hundred people here. And the list goes on that on the 5th starts another list of people who were cremated after that. And among the list of people are people from, here at the end it speaks of, it gives the letter of the nationality of the person. So against my father it has a T, which in French is Czech, T-C-H-E-Q. There are people with the S, which is most probably Slovakia. There's people with a P, which is Poland. Those are the letters that I can see here under nationality, okay? And these names are not in any order of, just most probably in the order they were put in the crematorium. And they're written by the person who was responsible for making these notes. I did not have this available until 2 months ago, or something like that, which was sent to me by a friend of mine. It's called the Crematoriums Verzeichnis in Lublin, Majdanek, which is one of the camps. And this list is pages from 1 to 58. I don't know what number page this is. This is page number, don't know. Page number 39 out of the 58 pages which they sent over. So I made a copy of it, and I've given it to my brother's granddaughter, who was here for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's under Meisel Family, Brno, October 2014. That's when it was printed. Okay, and of course I've got it's called Prohlášení za mrtvého. It's called the court pronounces declaration of death, you can call it.
Tell me.
Yes.
We're going to be done very soon for today. Where are you when the war ends? Tell me a little bit about.
We're sitting, I think it's an evening, or I don't know, we're at the school. And I can tell you only that that it's I think there's a sort of a lifting of a cloud. I don't know how to describe it, but obviously it's a day of rejoicing in the school. You can feel it. Nobody knows what's happened. It's just the end of the fighting. And I used to say, we followed this war. Daily is not a description, it's hourly. Not only from the English point of view, the bombing and so forth, which was the main thing, the advancement. I remember that one of my best friends, Moshe Tzvikal, his father landed with the Czech troops in Normandy. So there was one of the students who graduated before we did, Kraus, who landed in Normandy with the Czech force. So we're very closely connected, government school and so forth. So we're very much into what was going on and very much interested in what was going on. But I always said that had there been an election at the end of the war, and there was a competition between Mr. Attlee, Labour, and had Stalin been put up for premiership in England, Stalin would have taken it hands down.
Why?
There was no, because everybody realized that it was the Russians. First of all, the Russians liberated Prague and not the Americans.
Yes, but the Americans could have gotten there first, but because of the treaties.
No,
Patton.
Nothing to do with treaties.
Yeah, Patton was in Pilsen already. He was ready to go move
Who
on
was?
Prague. Patton. General Patton.
Was where? He was in Pilsen.
But he was ready to go into Prague, and Eisenhower told him no.
Okay. I don't know. I know.
But this is his
I know the story of Yalta,
Yes.
where Mr. Stalin tells Mr. Churchill and a sleeping Roosevelt, listen, my friend, I'm losing 10 Russians for every one American. I'm 2,000 kilometers from Prague. You are 200 kilometers from Prague. If I reach Prague before you do, which I hope will not happen, I'm going to take that part of Czechoslovakia, Carpato-Ruthenia, which is a tongue inside of Russia. And that's what was agreed. The day, and I know now from my wife who was already there when the Russians came, who'd been liberated by the Russian army near Berlin. The Russians closed the border on the 9th of April when they entered Prague. Okay?
Of May.
9th of April.
Okay.
And 10th of April is the day, I think Prague was liberated on the 9th of April, before Berlin, right?
I'm not quite sure. I think, okay.
No, Google, right?
We'll
whatever it was.
We'll figure it out.
9th, 10th. I know that you may be right, because I know that Prague now celebrates the 9th and not the 10th, for whatever reason.
For whatever reason. But
I know that the American forces were in Pilsen.
yeah.
I don't know about any order, why not, and so forth.
Right.
In fact, the simple reason was, in what we understood, we're now talking about England.
Right.
We understood that the Russians had advanced, whatever the distance was between the Yalta Conference, out of all proportion. Never mind.
most.
Yeah, okay. They lost thousands more, hundreds more.
Millions
thousands.
more. Millions.
Okay, as a result of that. And they had won the war as far as military ground forces. The British had bombed Germany and so they made a big do out of it, of bombing Dresden and so forth, which is considered today as homicide or whatever.
Carpet bombing.
Okay. I'm saying from my feeling that the popularity of the Russians, we knew nothing of what Stalin had done to the Jews. Nothing.
Of course,
nothing. We knew nothing. We didn't know that Stalin lined up unarmed Jews in the front trenches in front of the Germans in order to get the Germans to rise and attack the trench, and they would fire at them. Russian troops, but they put Jews in the front, without arms. I'm speaking about the Battle for Moscow. Right at the beginning. I'm just saying, this was my opinion, the atmosphere. There was not such a thing as communism in this. We're talking about Russia. In other words, if Stalin of Russia had competed with Attlee, it was unknown. To us, it was unknown. We knew Churchill, we knew Roosevelt, we knew Patton, we knew Eisenhower, we knew Montgomery, and so forth. We knew of Rommel, De Gaulle, yes, and so forth. But I said, in our opinion as kids, we thought if somebody was to make an election, Stalin would have taken first prize.
But when the war is done, you and Rudy are flown back to Prague with this very unique airlift. Back to Czechoslovakia.
By the Czech Air Force.
By the Czech Air Force.
RAF Czech Squadron 311 or 310, I don't know.
Sure.
Okay.
There's been many documentaries about this squadron, and it's a very famous.
Yeah. And the funny thing, one of the commander of that squadron, his name was Otselka. He's a squadron commander of that Liberator squadron. His brother was the commander of the Spitfire squadron of the Czech Air Force. And he became the commander of the flying school in which I got my wings, which I participated in Olomouc for the Israeli Air Force.
Okay, and we're gonna get to that probably the next time we meet, because that is basically everything that we've done now and talked about is just to set everything up for actually.
Okay,
but do you remember getting on this plane?
Yes, I remember getting on the plane.
With your brother.
Yes.
Explain this to me. I mean, this is
nothing. We had our suitcases. There was an attempt to prevent us from going back by the Adlersbergs, who wanted to adopt us.
Okay.
They already had more information than we had about the Polish community. Was very much more involved in what was going on, and he knew more than we knew. And I think they suspected that the chances of our parents being alive was zero. Leo Adlersberg had a brother-in-law, and he had information that his brother-in-law passed away and his wife was alive in Prague. He came to visit her in Prague together with me. It's a very interesting story. But the attempt, there was no question about it. We were sure our parents, my mother was a very strong person. We were all sure that there was nothing.
Absolutely. And you took care of your brother for all these years. You must have felt like some sort of obligation.
I have to bring him back, of course. Yeah. No question about it.
No question about it. 1945, you're 17 years old.
We buy cigarettes, coffee, and silk stockings before we go back. Each bought a couple of packs, which was a fortune back in Czechoslovakia. That was so-and-so. So we had a separate satchel full of coffee, ground coffee, cigarettes, and silk stockings.
And this is all to use as a currency?
Yes. To bring presents to a Sekal family which we knew nothing about at that point, except that they were certainly okay, I mean, there was no reason. They were not Jewish.
Your neighbors?
They're not, they're much closer than neighbors. They have a building, friends, which have a building which my father helped to.
The family that dug the
Yes, we don't know about that yet.
We don't know about
okay.
That.
We don't know.
So you and Ruby get on this
plane.
And
this whole airplane, these, I don't know, 60 kids, 80 kids, something in that order, arrive in most probably three Liberators flew together. We land at Ruzin Airport. We're taken by bus to a school, to an elementary school, where we are put up for the night on school benches. I couldn't care less. No blankets, freezing cold, okay? was cold in the sun. And I wake up in the morning, and nobody has any cigarettes, nobody has any coffee, nobody has any silk stockings. Everything was stolen by the people who ran the school, this place, and so forth. That's my first memory of Prague. And of course, it's explained to us that this is so valuable, you know, that there's such a shortage of it all that you can't be surprised that these people robbed us. All of us, not only me and Rudy. You know, so all our presents which we decided to bring, we went smoking, we didn't need silk stockings, and we went making coffee, right? So anyhow, from there, the next day, Rudy and I went to the railway station. There was no tickets, no nothing. You climbed on the train. Trains were moving without any payment or anything like that.
Total anarchy.
Yeah, well,
Balagan.
that's how it was after the war. It was a balagan,
totally.
yes.
Yeah.
And that's how we arrived in Bedford. And we walked from the railway station to Brno. And we walked all the way from the railway station, I remember, to the address at Huterov Rybnik, where we lived. Correction. On the morning after, we went to the address where Renee, in the notes, it noted where she was living in Prague. The Red Cross, my cousin Renee.
Was she living in a Red Cross tent?
No, she was living with a Koretz family in Prague, which were friends from the concentration camp.
She's your first cousin, right?
My first cousin, yes. Walter Meisel's daughter. And I arrived at that the same day, most probably the same day we arrived, maybe at the most the next day. She's on all fours, no hair at all, has paratyphus, and she's on all fours. She can't stand up, and she's with this family. And it's already like 3 months after. She still doesn't have enough strength. She weighs about 35 kilos or something like that. She's still recognizable, her beautiful face, but no hair and so forth. There's some photos which later on, when I brought her to Brno with us. And I was with her a few hours and so forth, because she lived with these people. And the daughter of Koretz was also with her, or the son or the daughter. I don't remember the correction. They're still alive. She's still alive. Her friend is still alive in California somewhere. Anyhow, she emigrated to Israel afterwards, Koretsova.
So tell me about.
And we came, and then we came to the apartment. I go up to the apartment with our suitcases, one suitcase and so on. And I knock on the door, and the lady opens the door and said, "Who are you?" I said, "We're Meisel, this is our apartment."
Wait.
Yes?
Before this, your cousin, Renee.
She remained with the family.
I understand, but this is the first time that you're seeing somebody
Yes.
who went through the Holocaust.
Yes. She knows
And
nothing.
she's your cousin.
Yes, and she knows nothing about. She only knows that they were taken away to Terezin and so forth. She was not. She was at that time at the Jewish school. All the kids were taken from the Czech schools.
Is she older or younger than you?
She's 1 month older.
She's one of those. So you guys are same age.
Exactly. Yes.
But do you see your cousin, and do you understand then what happened to her?
Oh yes, of course. Because by this time, we all understand.
Okay.
Because by this time, most of the camps and most of the things,
Okay,
and
so
people
you're
are
not-
returning. Hundreds of people are returning into Prague.
And
They're
Prague is
walking
like
the
It's a
streets.
mess. It's like chaotic. Can you explain what Prague was like in the last the week or two after the war? I mean, it must have been mad. People coming back and looking for
You know,
one.
we were. Hello.
צהריים טובים, מר הוגו מרום, זאת שרית מישראל.
שלום לך, אני באמצע דיון. את יכולה להתקשר איתי יותר מאוחר?
כן, מתי נוח לך?
אחרי צהריים.
אוקיי, בקשר לדירה בלוי אשכול 50, למכירה או להשכרה.
להשכרה.
צריך לראות, יש גם השנייה למכירה.
שניהם עכשיו להשכרה, כן?
שתיהם להשכרה, לא
כן,
למכירה?
נכון.
בסדר, אני אדבר איתך.
בסדר, ביי.
So Prague was. And of course, there's Russian soldiers everywhere.
Russian soldiers. I will never remember it again to tell you. A Russian officer, lieutenant, is billeted at the home, he billets himself at the home of Sekas, of the Czech family, of our friends outside of Brno. And I come back from school and I find him on his knees in front of the toilet, and his hair is all soap, and he's putting his head into the toilet, and he's pulling the chain, and he's putting the water. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "What a fantastic invention for washing your hair." He'd never seen a toilet in his life. He came from the Ukraine, an officer. You know, just to give you some sort of a flashback of the type of things that went on. And
Tell me about you coming home to Brno.
To Brno, we came that first day. We got off the train, we walked. I don't think there was a tram running. There may have been. May have got onto number 5, which was the tram which ran from the railway station to our house. We went upstairs, and 2 ladies lived in our apartment. Mrs. Ritter with her son. The father didn't come back from concentration camp. And Mrs. Drachmanova alone. Her children and her husband hadn't come back. And they lived in the apartment as the Germans had left it. All the Jewish apartments were taken over by either Sudeten Germans or Germans on the whole. And when they came back from concentration camps, they just went to empty apartments. People from concentration camps that didn't even come from Brno. They came to the cities where there was some organization for food and so forth. And these 2 families occupied family, Mrs. Drachman and Mrs. Ritter with her son.
Who you didn't know before.
Never saw them in my life before.
So you walk in and you see
and
these
I
people.
see them in
Is
the
there
apartment.
furniture in your house? Is there
No, there's
nothing?
not our furniture. No, furniture is there.
But it's not yours.
Fully, it's not ours. And we realized what's happened, and of course we're not going to remove a Jewish lady with her son who was in a concentration, so we turn around and we automatically either take the tram, because it was about at least 15 kilometers outside of town of that time, and we go to the Sekars, and that's how we got to the Sekars. Okay? Who I don't know how I would have found it at night without an address, you know, Yandaskova number 57. The Sekal family, his mother, we called her grandma. We spent all our holidays there. I mentioned it to you. And he was a tennis coach and
sure, your father's friend.
That's right.
Yeah. So why don't you and your brother stay at your house? Because the other families are there?
We didn't even think about, I mean, they've occupied 3 people are living in the apartment. I didn't even know whether Drachman had family. They came to the door, they said hello to us, you've been to England, so we were like very well off, you know what I mean, from a point of view of we didn't go through anything. So, and we look at them as survivors. It's a very peculiar relationship at that time, you know, towards people who've been to concentration camp and lost their families and so forth. So I wouldn't even dream of asking them to take us in or whatever it was. And there was nothing of ours there. I mean, I walked in and I saw that nothing was ours there except the walls, you know. Yeah, okay. I eventually moved back into that apartment when they went to Israel. When Mrs. Ritter went to Israel and Drachman went to Israel, Rudy by that time was gone already to the United States, 1946. 1947, I think, end of 40. No, when Rudy moved out, I moved in to that apartment. I was at university already.
Okay, we're going to stop for today.
Okay.
And I'm making a note here that we are,
We're on our way to Sekals. (1:30), wow.
okay. Sekal,
You turning it off?
yes.
Okay.
Off.